Thank you. So, slightly different topic. I'll be talking about part of my PhD study on Patagosaurus, aka Fat Pat. I'll explain to you why in a minute. Oops, it went too fast. Well, we all know sauropods, I guess. They are the largest terrestrial animals ever to have lived. They have a very distinct bowplan with a very long neck, a big body, columnar limbs, long tail, and a very small head. They were basically efficient feeding machines, and that proved to be very successful in their evolution because they stuck around for around the entire Mesozoic and have been found worldwide. Now, you probably all know the late Jurassic and Cretaceous famous sauropods, but phylogenetic studies indicate that the early to middle Jurassic is actually the time of the diversification and radiation of these animals. Unfortunately, there are not really very good specimens preserved from this time. There are a few from Gondwanan, so from Africa and Madagascar, and from Argentina. Now, if we zoom into Argentina, there's a locality in the province of Chubut in Patagonia, which has localities with rich vertebrate assemblage from the early Jurassic, including sauropods, and including Patagosaurus, which is the object of my PhD. Patagosaurus variaceae is known from two localities, which are both bone beds, massive death assemblages. There's other material there as well. There's another sauropod, a basal sauropod, Volchymeria. There's also a theropod. There might be some more material, but I'll get to that in a second. And so basically this material has all been dug up in the 70s already. And it has been described already in the 70s and the 80s. However, the original description is a composite of all different individuals because Patagosaurus has at least 8 individuals, probably more. And also these individuals are of different sizes. So a revision of the holotype was due, so that's what I've been working on now as well. Also, there's material, number 934, which is hosted in Buenos Aires, which might be yet another taxon of sauropods, so we're working on that at the moment. So more about that, hopefully in the coming months. So why I call it Fat Pat is because as far as sauropods go, it's not a very pneumatic sauropod. It's a basal eusauropod, and we actually scanned one of the posterior dorsals, which is quite a big bone, so we had to wheelchair it in basically in a hospital and scan it in a medical CT scanner. But they gave us this very nice result. You can see here that there's actually a pneumatic opening below the diapophysis on both sides, and which is separated by a thin bony septum, and which connects ventrally in a sort of ventral chamber. Now, as far as we know, this could be an orthopomorphy for this animal, but I don't think anybody has scanned this type of material before. But so far we consider it one of the key features of Patagosaurus. The holotype is actually quite well preserved. There's some axial material, there's cervicals, dorsals and caudals, and there's some material of the pelvic girdle, and the femur is preserved. The funny thing is actually on the original description there should be another ilium, but that one's lost, so that's quite strange because it's quite a really big ilium, but it's lost. Nobody knows where it is. Anyway, the cervicals in Patagosaurus are distinct because they have quite a high angle between this lamina here, which connects the postzycopophysis to the diapophysis, and this lamina here, which connects the diapophysis to the posterior part of the centrum. Next to that, the dorsals are quite distinct in that the pedicels are very elongated, and also the neural spine is really high, and the diapophyses are placed quite high up for sauropods. The neural canal is also quite elongated. Other than that, the ilium has this nice hook-shaped anterior lobe and this elongated pubic peduncle. The femur is axially quite flattened and transversely quite broad, as you see here. However, besides the holotype, there are many more individuals found. And as you can see here on this quarry map, there's actually smaller individuals found as well. Here you see a little ilium, here you see an ilium that's like a little bit smaller than the holotype, and here you also see a small femur and pubis and stuff that belongs to a small individual. So that made me want to look at, are there any ontogenetic stages preserved in Patagosaurus? Now, ontogeny in sauropods is not very well known. This is basically due to the fact that immature specimens with their fragile bones just generally not preserve very well. However, there are some examples. Probably the most famous is Euauropasaurus, with several immature and very small individuals preserved. There are basal sauropodomorphs, there are diplodocids, and also titanosaurs. But as far as eusauropods go, there's actually not much known about their ontogeny. The only published specimen is the Zaudosaurus from Morocco. As far as I know, they're working on that still. And then there's Palaeontological from Madagascar, and also we don't know much about that one. So Patagosaurus could actually be a nice specimen to fill in the gap about the sauropod ontogeny. Pardon. Now, ontogeny in sauropods is basically established by looking at the vertebrae. Morphological ontogenetic stages are usually described by the amount of fusion between the centrum and the neural arch. And the fusion happens at some point when they are sexually mature, or maybe not. But you can see on young individuals that there's no fusion whatsoever. Another feature is the development of the diapophysis, as you can see here, and also the neural spine that develops during ontogeny. And finally also pneumatization that develops in ontogeny, and lamination, like the forming of more complex lamination on sauropods. In very immature specimens, they don't have the very species-specific laminations present yet. So let's have a look at the juvenile material of Patagosaurus. I have many more pictures, but I don't want to bore you, and I only have 12 minutes, so if you want to know more, please come and find me later. This is the smallest individual we have. It has a little femur preserved. It's actually the only femur I could carry by myself. It's that small. And it quite resembles the holotype, but it's not so flattened axially as the holotype. It has a pubis preserved, which is just a generic sauropod pubis, but it also has a little ilium preserved, which has that nice hook-shaped anterior lobe, as in the holotype. Another individual, which also has an ilium preserved, which is slightly larger than the smallest one we have, has that long pubic peduncle. Unfortunately, not the anterior lobe preserved, but it does have neural arches. As you can see, it's not fused, so it's still very immature. However, it does have here the development of that pneumatic opening that we see in the holotype. It also has the elongated neural spine, and it has the laminations already developed. So it's an immature specimen, but it's already in a higher stage of development. Another individual, which is one size smaller than the holotype, still has no fusion between the neural arch and the centrum, but it does have all the laminations. Here you can see the pneumatic opening, and it also has that nice anterior lobe, hook-shaped as in the holotype. Now, last but not least, this is an interesting specimen to me, is an individual that is actually fully grown. There are no sutures present, so it's at the last stage of its development. It resembles the holotype. However, it also has some processes developed that you don't see in the holotype, or very rudimentary. So what this means is that even though a species might be already in a quite far stage of development, still not all features will be present. So that's an interesting feature for sauropod ontogeny and for eusauropod ontogeny. I plucked these individuals in a quick matrix just to see what would happen. And you see here the holotype clusters nicely together with the larger individual and the slightly smaller individual. And then the two smaller ones cluster together as well. First of all, I thought maybe this is a sign of heterochrony, and I got all excited. But then I went to look at the matrix, and it's actually more to do with one character that's scored for the larger individuals and not for the smaller, which is the stage of lamination, which is, of course, a telltale sign of the ontogenetic stages. So that matches up quite nicely with what we know of sauropod ontogenetic morphology. So just to summarize, I have a small lead 60s for scale to show how big they were. Next to the holotype, we have one very large individual in the Patagosaurus specimens. We have one size smaller, and then we have two juveniles. Now, of course, the next logical step will be to do a renewed phylogeny, score more characters, see if we can find more characters, and then I would like to do histology on all these specimens, also to see if we can find their exact age and ontogeny. So now I'd just like to take a moment to shamelessly promote EAVP, which I'm organizing next year. It will be in Haarlem, in Tyler's Museum, a very nice historical old building. And here's our email address, and you can also find us on Twitter and Facebook. It will be from July 6th to 10th next year, so please save the date, and we hope to see you all there. I would like to thank my supervisors and, of course, the Palaeontological Association for getting me here and for organizing this congress, and, of course, for you all for listening. So, thank you.